Okay, so I will call this to order. And I asked Deborah if she wanted to be secretary. So I'm going to nominate her if we have a second.
I'll second that wholeheartedly, and Troy too.
Okay. Yeah, we don't have like it's an ad hoc committee. We're not going to really, we can't make binding recommendations. It's really for the discussion. So it's not going to be quite super formal. But let's start out with going around with introductions, and that will be helpful for Deborah. So I'm Cassie Cresswell. I'm a Jones parent, and I'm a parent rep on the LSC and the current chair. And I will just go down the list as I see it. So Amy Hand.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Sorry, I didn't realize you were going to ask us.
Okay, yeah, you don't have to have the camera on. Just say hi.
Jones Senior.
Oh, Amy is a Jones parent. Carol.
Hello, I'm a parent of a senior at Jones.
Deborah.
Hi, I'm a parent of a sophomore at Jones. I am a parent representative on the local school council.
Michelle. Okay, let's give Michelle. We'll go to Raquel.
Hi, my name is Raquel. I have a freshman, and this is my second time being a parent at Jones. Thank you.
Sarah.
My name is Sarah Ma. I'm the LSC secretary for the Jones LSC, and I have a sophomore.
And Troy.
Troy Hilbrands, work in the main office. I am also the non-teacher LSC rep.
Great. And Michelle, if you hear us and you want to put in your chat, put in the chat your own little intro, that would be great. Yes, so I was just going to give a little background on what the principal evaluation process is like for LSCs. And for those of you who have not been part of it before. And so I have slides here and in the chat as well. I sort of hate sharing my slides because it's so hard to see everyone.
I can. You want me to share them?
Yeah, can you do that? And do I have to give you permission to share or?
Yes.
Yeah, it's kind of crappy. Actually, can I just make you like a co-host, Sarah? And then,
Yeah.
then you'll be able to, I think, right?
Yes.
Okay. I'm gonna try.
Right. Just let me know when you want me to move forward.
Okay. So you want to go to the next one? Yeah, so here's just the agenda. And then if you go to the next, I'll give some background on the principal evaluation process. Contract principals are evaluated every year. If you don't have additional indicators, half of your evaluation is from the professional practice evaluation of the LSC. So it's based on basically the LSC's interactions with the principal throughout the school year, and including observations of the principal's work, et cetera. And then half of it is from quantitative data. Here, well, give me 1 second. So then we have the option of adding some additional indicators. So basically, if you go on to the next slide, Sarah, these are added in after you do these two other components. So one is one the LSC does, and one is really just determined by data from central office. So the professional practice evaluation is the part that the LSC does. There's 5 competencies, and then there's key behaviors under each of these competencies. If you go to the LSC resource guide, you can see the detailed list there of what all of these are. And so those, basically the LSC assigns a score to each of the behaviors, and then you get a total combined score for each of the competencies, and then those are weighted. So some of them are weighted more heavily than others. And then on the next slide, this is just sort of a description of the sorts of evidence that you can look at to determine the scores on those. You can do some more formal things like surveys. You can get data available about your school from CPS. You can get various documents. This Appendix G is from the LSC Resource Guide and tells you you can do an interview with the principal. We just did like a questionnaire last year. You can, various other things. So basically, however you want to gather evidence, and then you bring that to bear on whether you agree with whether the behaviors are happening. And then next slide. So this just goes through that. That happens basically, you're supposed to collect evidence throughout the year. And then you have a closed session in the spring to determine a score. And then the principal can request a feedback session, so then you can modify that. And then, so you have that professional practice score done by basically May 31st is when you have to enter it into the principal online tool, like evaluation online tool. So next slide. So yes, and then that other part that I talked about back on slide 3 is basically the data that's going into the school quality rating for the school is also used for the principal evaluation. And that is just essentially, it's set. There's not really anything that the LSC has to do with that. And so you get that component of the score later in fall. And then some of that might be missing this year because CPS suspended some of the testing and stuff that is used for it because of the pandemic. And then if you've done additional indicators from the previous year, then you incorporate those after you have both of the other components. So you need to come up with your additional indicators essentially a year in advance. So that's what we're looking at tonight. And basically the LSC and the principal have to agree on these by November 1st. So welcome to those of you who just joined us. I think it's Dr. Plunkett and it's Violet. Violet is a community rep on LSC. We just did a little round of intros earlier, so filling in for you guys. Yeah, so these additional indicators should be essentially goals that are agreed upon between the principal and LSC, and they need to be in writing, they need to be measurable, and then you have to decide how much they're going to be weighted or their value in advance. So then I have 2 examples here. One is from Bell Elementary, where they did this focus on discipline. And then I have 2 in the next slide as well. So yeah, so let's look at these first. These are from Prosser. They're both actually sort of related to like staff / teaching issues. So one is related to having basically a reach observation schedule. So the reach is the evaluation process for teachers. And then the other was related to basically communication. And so for that one, they were going to do a special survey of staff to get a score for that. And for their reach one, they were going to have their PPC, like the Professional Problems Committee, which is a group of teachers working basically on like contract issues. And they were going to score that. So that's just two examples there. Do you want to click through to the Bell one, Sarah? So that one is more elaborate. And so they have like, you can see at the top, the proposed language for the additional indicator. And then they have sort of like a bunch of different steps. So I don't know if you want to, were you on the LSC when they came up with this? Sarah, do you want to talk about it a little bit? Just like,
Yeah, so
and what you created
I mean,
for
just-
value and stuff.
right. And so first I'll talk about the criteria, the indicator, and then I'll talk about the value. So we had implemented restorative justice at the school, and we felt like even though the school had done it as CPS wanted to, and the principal felt that they were following all of the guidelines, we just felt like there was a disconnect with the actual implementation. And then and so we wanted to have just a little bit finer detail. And so we worked really hard with the principal to develop these to make sure that we were on the same page. And we were doing this during remote learning. So some of them were looking at data, but I think, okay, I'm sorry, it's been a while since I looked at this, but basically they could be measurable. And that's really what's important. And then as far as a value, our chief told us it's not so much that it gets a specific value, it just informs your overall just principal evaluation. I don't know if you heard something different, Cassie. We were not able to assign a specific value, and there's nowhere in PIAT that you can actually assign a value to this. It's more of like it informs your overall evaluation. So I'm going to stop presenting this, but it's linked in the presentation. So if you have the presentation, if you wanted to read this on your own time, you could.
Yeah, so to go to Carol's questions from the chat, like one of the reasons you'd want to add these additional indicators is, especially if there is, I don't know, a particular issue that you want, like the LSC thinks the school should be working on, or that the school is working on, and it's sort of making the principal evaluation process a little more directly relevant to the conditions of the school and, you know, the culture of the school and what the particular goals of the school are. And it's just, I think it adds, you know, like it should be goals that the school community wants to see achieved. And it just means that the principal evaluation is a little, the CPSF is pretty generic. And so it's not necessarily, you know, the things that you're working on as a school. So yeah, so that's that's final slide or whatever said, you know, our school improvement plan has priority areas. The school set these priorities for their equity initiative a year ago. And so those are some things that might be like a good place to look for overall goals that would inform our ideas of what would be useful additional indicators. And then I put a couple other links on this slide that I thought would be helpful and relevant. So one is like a final project from like a master's degree in industrial organization, and the focus was on the principal evaluation process. And so with a special focus on essentially like having a diversity related competency. So she looks really at one of the existing competency areas and sort of zooms in on it. And that, so if you look at slides 13 to 17 in that one, it kind of gives you an idea of taking one of the competency areas that is already in the principal evaluation process and making it more relevant, I think was her goal. So I just thought it was, I don't think those are necessarily directly usable for additional indicators for us, but it framed some of those. It's kind of the competencies and the key behaviors that and that sort of system that already exists in the principal evaluation process. It kind of adapts one of those to equity issues, and that is definitely, you know, a framing issue, I think, right now at Jones. The other thing I thought would be of interest to this group is the culturally responsive teaching and leading standards that the State Board of Ed just created and passed. And I think Violet was actually part of that, the development of those. And those are, you know, those are written as standards, and they're essentially like written then as, you know, like the behaviors that support those standards. So that is really written in a way that I think could be pretty easily adapted to sort of what we're already doing as a principal evaluation process of here's a competency, here's key behaviors, what evidence shows that these behaviors are happening. And then we, as an LSC, assign a numerical rating to those. So I think those are something that could work well. And they're definitely, you know, very relevant to everything that's you know, we want to look at as a school. So that was just some sort of like, you know, background kind of resources that we could use for this. And I am happy to hear other ideas that people have and things they've been thinking about with regard to this process. And I think the goal is to at least have like some options at the end of this meeting. And depending what those options are, maybe fleshing out a couple of those and then bringing them to the LSC meeting, and we'll see what we can get consensus on adding. So go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, my comment, sorry, I'm gonna lower my hand, was when we did additional indicators at Bell, we actually were doing them really to protect the principal. So what was happening is the principal kept getting dinged on their reviews due to this restorative justice implementation, mostly based on parent feedback and teacher feedback. And so what we wanted to do is help the principal to have a more robust program. So by having some kind of accountable steps that they could show that we achieved A, we achieved B, then we C and D, that we felt like that would help them be able to get a better principal evaluation because they weren't getting like this negative feedback from not implementing this program well. So it's not necessarily like a punitive thing. I guess I'm kind of talking about this in a way of like, we shouldn't be thinking of this like, oh, it's not punitive. This is just a way to help boost the programs at Jones and what's happening from an implementation point of view. So I just thought of that as a way of reframing this.
Thanks, Sarah. Go ahead, Amy.
I just wanted to clarify, because when I look at the overview of the principal performance evaluation from the CPS web, information, it just gives you two buckets to put your evaluation into. One is the professional practice, as you described, which is 50% of the final ratings, and the other is the student growth and other measures, which is weighted the other 50%. And so I'm trying to clarify, like, would these additional indicators be part of the 50% of the professional practice piece of the principal's evaluation? And if so, it seems like one of the core competencies of the professional practice is already the continuous improvement and school vision, which is what is in the CIWP. So when you say we should incorporate some elements of the CIWP into the principal evaluation, it seems like that's already embedded in one of the core competencies as stated in this LSC, I forget what the document is called, but, or am I reading it wrong, or?
So basically the process is like the professional practice evaluation is done. That gives you that first number. And then the second number is basically given to you by CPS with that school quality rating data. Then you can essentially like adjust your final number with the use of the additional indicators that you've come up with. So really, I think it would make sense to make it a bit more formalized if we're going to do that and say that, okay, we're going to use blah and it will be worth 10% at the end. If it's going to be a quantitative thing. And that, I mean, all those different components in the professional practice have a certain weight, and really, you can think of them as giving half the weight to the total that they do to the professional practice rating. So we could kind of, you would have to shrink a little bit the professional practice rating and the other one and assign some weight to these additional indicators. Yeah, I mean, it's not really specified from what I can tell in the guidance to the LSC and to like in policy. So I think the job as you develop it and agree to it is that you make it explicit enough that it makes sense a year from now when you're trying to use it. So yeah, so just the CIWP things are sort of, they apply to the full CIWP. So the idea for something like this is that it's a specific goal. So like Sarah was saying at Bell, it was related to the new sort of behavior and discipline policies there. At Prosser, it looks like the thing that they were working on was basically teaching staff related goals on communication. So I think it's just something that like the LSC would like to highlight, and that's what that's sort of the idea behind it. So yeah.
I had a question too.
Go ahead, Carol.
Thank you. So is the purpose of this meeting is to identify additional indicators, and then the LSC is going to vote on it? Is that what that is?
Well, it's not just a simple vote because the principal has to agree, right? So essentially like he has like a veto power over it.
Mm-hmm.
So we could have the majority of the LSC wanting something, but if your principal doesn't agree, then you can't use that indicator. So yes, this is sort of, this should be essentially like a brainstorming session. And if we can push them out, that is helpful.
Okay. So we'll just, you probably have some ideas already. I mean, the LSC or within the LSC, is there a specific committee for principal evaluation, or is it the whole LSC committee?
It's the whole LSC that does it. And so it's, we did I think almost all the components last year. So I think we're gonna be able to reuse a lot of the material from last year in terms of what
And then
evidence do we want to find, what surveys do we find? So we haven't decided yet whether we'll have a whole separate standing committee. So this committee is just to come up with additional indicators.
Yeah.
And that's like the
Will you take
urgent
some-
issue for the fall, so.
No, I was just wondering, so are you just going to take some things off from before, or this will just be in addition to?
We can't take anything off. I mean, what we did was, I mean, unless there was a specific, I don't know what you're,
No, I
Yeah.
just was like, if you're saying that it's not effective, what you had, what was
I don't know,
given
what
to
we
you?
had is the bare minimum that you have to do per the LSC guide. Yeah. So this
Yeah.
is just if there is something in the guide that isn't as specific as what we think we would like to look at, then you can add it here. Yeah.
So like school-specific initiatives or things that
Yeah.
we're trying to make some improvements.
Right. Perfect. Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, you guys are the LSC, so there's specific things that you've been working on, right? Like equity and, well, God, the dress code and, and, that sort of thing. So, I don't know. I mean, maybe do you have some ideas of some things that you have in mind? Or, I mean, I didn't look at what was on the evaluation or whatever. And I just wonder, like, are Amy and I the only two on here that are not on the LSC, or Dr. Plunkett? And I don't.
Dr. Plunkett, Raquel, and Michelle Parada.
Is Michelle and Raquel on the committee or LSC or no?
They're not, no.
No. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So,
just Troy, Deborah, Sarah, me, Violet.
so well, I mean, it's like four people plus you from the LSC. I mean, it's not a real good representation of generating.
It's not, I think you need to, we're just here to brainstorm. We have to do it publicly.
I
And it's not so much, I wouldn't be so worried about representation. It's just kind of like, okay, based on what we're doing at Jones and what the existing principal evaluation looks like, is there anything else that we wanted to add? We have until November 1st. And Dr. Pars was supposed to be here, but he obviously is unable to attend. And
Okay.
so we can't do anything without him. So it's just a way to brainstorm, but we have to always do it publicly. So.
I see. Okay, gotcha.
Deborah, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, as I was kind of scratching my head about all of this and doing my thinking and planning for the meeting tonight, if you think about what kinds of things we've been hearing in public comment at LSC meetings and public comment at equity meetings, those things that are related to teacher satisfaction, those things that are related to student satisfaction, that are particularly culture and climate issues, are not heavily weighted in the existing principal evaluation rubric. And so I think if there's a real desire to see change in those areas at Jones, having some kind of agreed plan that says this is how we want to measure it, and these are things that we really think are important, I think puts then a priority on those issues that the current evaluation really doesn't, because they get watered down because they're actually quite small in the existing rubric. I think if you look at the ISBE's culturally responsive teaching and leading standards, I had a chance to read that today for the first time. It gives you some really quantifiable ways to say, okay, this is, if we want our leadership to be culturally responsive, which I think would address many of the kinds of issues that we hear in public comment in our open meetings, it's codified already elsewhere. We don't have to pick the whole thing, but maybe there are a few items on those lists that might be really useful to us, and that would help boost the priority of our administration to address those issues, because under the existing rubric, they're a very small part. And even if those are scored very, very meagerly at this point, it doesn't have a real effect on the overall rating, because if you look at the kinds of things that we as Jones College Prep have, because we have a highly selective student group who were highly motivated just to get into Jones and come with, you know, academic desires that you might not find in a standard CPS high school. I think in a lot of the statistical measurements for test scores and grades and college readiness and all that, our kids always deliver. And so if we want to put the emphasis for our leadership on those things that would help give our students not only an excellent academic high school experience, but a culturally well-rounded and culturally accepting and comfortable experience, maybe we want to add an additional indicator to give more emphasis to something like that. Because I think we hear this from our community every single meeting. And I think there's some value to agreeing that we really want to work on this.
Violetta, you said you worked on those. I wasn't able to read them, but do you have any thoughts on that? I don't mean to put you on the spot.
No, it's okay. Yeah, so I worked on these between 2019 and 2020 with like a number of other stakeholders. I was actually only like one of 2 teachers that were like invited to be on the committee. Almost everybody else was like at the state level. So like people like running nonprofits and also just like district leaders. But some that like pop out for me, at least, thinking about like the Jones experience. One of them that could like be easily integrated would be like students as co-creators, which is like on page 5 if you're on the doc. And that could be like easily integrated in terms of like students keep asking for like the form to like air grievances kind of. And to like have a system in place to address like microaggressions and other instances of like harm. So you can easily integrate like students as co-creators by ensuring that that's done, and also ensuring that steps are followed through across the school on the various things that students are asking for. It basically like starts on page 1, like from the teacher perspective. So like, how are you doing the reflection of like white supremacy and like how that exists within education and also within your classroom? And also just like then going deeper into like the student experience. So like how are different students of different backgrounds experiencing your classroom and your environment, therefore the school as a whole. And then it starts going into like the community and stuff like that. So that's kind of like how the documents flow from one another. So yeah, I mean, there's like just so many things that I can easily see, like not as like a punitive thing, kind of similar to what Sarah was saying, but more so of like Jones is already doing some of these things. So like checking it off the list, or like we need to see more of this, and like how do we uplift what's already happening and also demonstrate areas of development.
Thanks, Violet. Yeah, I feel like the teaching and leading standards are sort of already written in a way that will make them easy to fit into the existing competencies and behaviors. So I think I would definitely be in favor of looking through those to see what is maybe most relevant at Jones, and also what should, like what the LLC would like to see as a priority. And I mean, it is a really, it's like A through H of the different standards. So it's a lot in there, and probably we'd want to sort it out and either pick a few or combine a few and rework it to make it, I mean, maybe it could essentially kind of function as an additional competency area.
Yeah, and I think setting it up to have quarterly goals. I mean, obviously it doesn't happen till November 1st, but just kind of giving once you meet this, then you do this, then you meet the next thing. I mean, if we feel like it's kind of building on it like that, if it's like a stepwise thing, I mean, it's hard. This is the hard part. It's measuring, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think looking at those from Prosser, your measurement can be like, you know, a rubric where you're like, you know, meets and exceeds, and do the rating. And so we could do the same sort of numerical rating that we do for the other key behaviors. Raquel?
Yes, thank you. Could we have an opportunity to review the additional indicators from Prosser and Bell, you know, and then come back at the next meeting with our thoughts on that? I mean, I just feel like the LSE should kind of like be guiding, you know, what you all are thinking, and, you know, wherever anyone else feels that something has been overlooked, then, you know, you could take our feedback on that. But to just like, you know, I can't just like have any ideas right now because I don't know what you all did for his evaluation last year and what you're thinking now. I see that you have 2 schools that you're using for reference, but, you know, I would like to further read some or part of those if possible, and then give feedback on that. And is there a reason why you all need to have this by November?
Yeah, that's just what is set as like the district policy. And I think maybe you can get some special dispensation or something from your network chief, but basically November 1st is the deadline to have it set. And, you know, you have to incorporate them 12 months later. So if you wait too long, then it's not really going to function in a way that it's like actually being incorporated into your principal's professional practices. So that's essentially what the timing of that has to do with. And so since our only LSC meeting right now is set to be October 12th, before November 1st. So we need to have this on the agenda to be decided on October 12th. So, you know, as an ad hoc committee, we can pretty much have, you know, set a meeting with 48 hours notice. So we could fit in another meeting before next week, before the 12th. So that's sort of up to the consensus of this group, whether that we want to do that. You want to go ahead, Troy?
I guess I was just, the November 1st is also in play because it doesn't have to be reviewed by CPS legal.
We probably will. I mean, the principal has to agree on it as well. So I don't think that like, yeah, they don't make a big deal of it like they do with the surveys. But I think if we have it formalized in a shape that, you know, the LSC and the principal are happy with by November 1st, then, you know, if like legal takes a look at it after that, I think, and tells you that you have to fix something, then that's more on them than on you.
Got it.
Sarah?
Yeah, my comment was the Prosser. I like Google Meets because it unraises my hand for me. I felt like their second criteria was super general, like principal communicate effectively and professionally. And then it was based on a survey. I feel like that's a little subjective. I'd like to make it less like what the principal might think that they are communicating efficiently, and then the teacher does a survey and everyone's like, no, you're not. Like, I just think like I'd like to see not that kind of additional indicator if I want it to be really meaningful, and have very specific asks so that there's no subjectivity. The principal knows exactly if I do the little points 4 bullet points, then I will meet this, and you could even have like, where it would say like, if you did at least 2, it would be proficient. If you got 3, if you got 4, it'd be excellent, and then, or some kind of feedback. Okay, there's a lot of hands going up.
Yeah, so I think the basic idea there is that if it's very concrete steps and not just, yeah, because I mean, the surveys, I think already kind of take care of that. And so, yes, I agree with that. I don't know if I'm getting like hands in order. How about, go ahead, Dr. Plunkett. I'll cover. people
Yeah,
who
I
have-
wanted to just add on to what Sarah said about like the goal and the expectation. Like you have to take subjectivity out of it. Like if, for example, if a communication thing was, for example, responds or sends out weekly updates, right? Like that is something that you can look and see. There's a weekly update that's sent out, right? It can't be subjectivity about, like you can't say, have a question that says, principal communicates regularly with me on a 1 to 5 rank, because that's very subjective, because regularly to each person means differently, right? It means something different to each person. Some people want every day, some people want once a week. So it has to be very, very specific if you're going to do something like that, and very, very measurable.
Yes, I mean, to be fair, I think I would encourage everyone to look at the competencies and the key behaviors that the professional practice evaluation is based on, because those themselves are not somehow entirely objective, and you can bring whatever evidence you need to as a council to evaluate whether those behaviors are taking place. So I think a standard of it is at least as clear and thoughtful as those, and hopefully an improvement upon those, because otherwise and if they're too redundant with those, I think it was Amy who was pointing out, then it's not really, there's not a point in doing some extra work and ironing them all out if there's a lot of overlap. But yeah, I mean, in any sort of evaluation process, it would be nice if we had some action steps, and doing those was part of evaluating whether this indicator was met. Michelle?
Yeah, sorry. Thanks. I have I'm a staff member at Jones. Question about, it's like kind of procedural, I guess. How, because this seems like a impactful thing on the evaluation. How do stakeholders, I guess, parents, teachers, et cetera, get to weigh in about the changes if it's voted on in the next meeting, I guess? Like where do we get, is there feedback from them somehow? Because I didn't know about this meeting, and I just happened to stumble upon it on the website, and thought I would listen in and see what was going on. So
Yeah, so with like the entire process, part of it is like gathering feedback formally. And so we, last year did surveys of students, parents, teachers, and non-teaching staff. And then basically every local school council member, in addition to, we ask for, various documents and data from the administration to use as evidence. But then we can also gather our own evidence, and we should be, as a parent, obviously you're observing your own students' interactions and process, but you should really be talking to your constituents as well. So if we have some indicator X that we add into this, then any LSE member should be getting feedback also from staff or parents or students if they have evidence that bears on that indicator. But if it's a little more cut and dried, then that sort of takes that out of it. So yeah, so this is like this committee, and if we have another meeting, is a way for the public to give feedback. But you're also just dependent on your elected representatives representing you well. And as we decide on what this indicator is. Raquel?
Thank you. I think what Dr. Plunkett was saying, like for the LSC as a body to, come to an agreement, and, when you're going through the steps of the evaluation, for example, the communication part, come to an agreement as a whole LSC, what you feel is acceptable, time frame, for communication. And I was also wondering if there's been surveys for the whole staff and maybe students. I know the students do that CPS survey, but has the LSC surveyed students and parents?
Yeah, we did a parent and a student survey for principal evaluation last year. And I think from what I can tell, that's also been done in numerous years past. So those surveys are one source of information. And then there's also like the 5 essentials surveys, and that information is available. And also, I don't know if it actually figures into the other 50% or not. Yeah, so then that's just something we have to like look at. And if there's evidence from that, that way it's, is evidence for the key behaviors, we can use that.
So pretty much this meeting today is the only opportunity for freshmen or new parents to have a voice, for you to hear the feedback from new parents.
Okay, I just want to.
Yeah, I think that these
Answer that
additional indicators are like, it's not actually even been used before. Not every school uses them. I think Sarah's description of it as like an extra credit is accurate.
Yeah, like I just went and pulled up from my old email when I talked to Luis, my old OLSCR rep, and it's just a way to augment the principal evaluation. If you felt like it was lacking in not being able to provide feedback to the principal that you wanted to provide, or to your community. There'll be plenty of like additional indicator. Honestly, it could have just been discussed at the LSC meeting or with just the principal, honestly, and voted on. I think the general feedback comes later. The additional indicator is it's just what I've been told is like extra credit. So it's a way for the LSC and the principal and everyone to communicate to the community. This is something that we feel is important. We want to measure it. We want to share that out. It's not even, if you go to PIAT, which is the principal evaluation online tool, you cannot actually put a number in for additional indicator. You just write a little paragraph. So
I
think
understand that.
I think we should focus on the what it would be. And it should be augmenting. I know what you're saying about feedback. I'm kind of surprised because honestly, I feel like it's up to the principal and the LSC to kind of hash that out, but
yeah, I mean, it'll be on the agenda for the October 12th meeting, and people can come and speak in public participation about it. Yes. But yeah, it's sort of just one component of the principal evaluation. I mean, it should try to make it, that the set of competencies and key behaviors is written for like the entire district, hundreds of schools, and it's not necessarily going to be super relevant to what your school is focusing on. And, since a lot of energy is put into the principal evaluation process, it makes sense for it to actually be useful and relevant for the school. Yes, and like the principal has to agree to it. I have no indication from him whether he'll be interested in agreeing to any additional indicators. So that is, like he has veto power over that, no matter what the other 11 LSC members say. So that is something to keep in mind as well. But I think it certainly is at least a good activity for the LSC to think about what matters in this process. Carol, do you have a new hand or an old hand?
Yeah, that's a new one.
Okay.
So I just had one that I wanted to suggest, and that is that since I have a senior, and she's my third senior that I've had, and I would, I don't, I'm a little bit underwhelmed with the college counseling process at Jones. And I just would like to see that it would be more personalized to the students and not a one size fits all, and not just be watch this video and look at this PowerPoint slide. I just don't feel like there's a lot of face to face with parents or students that I've been accustomed to at schools that are, similar size. And so I would just like to, I don't know what the indicator would be, but I think that it's, I don't know. I mean, in the last survey you did, I don't know what your response was, but I'd be real curious to see what parents think about the college counseling process. And I mean, I know kids go to good schools and, things always work out, but I just feel like it's a time of, for the students and parents, especially for first-time parents, which I'm not one, but it's really a time of, like, some people it's really stressful, and it should be more of a time of learning and seeing what options are out there and how to find the best school and, for yourself and things like that. And so to me, I just don't get a sense of, from the school, of what they're, I just don't get a sense from the counseling department of, like, I don't know, like, they don't have a personality. They don't have nothing stands out about them. And it's just all very cookie cutter. And I don't know. I don't know how that could be an indicator, but since I'm here and we're asked for some.
Yeah, I think that is actually, I think that's kind of what we want to come up with from this meeting, is maybe like a list of like possible areas that the indicator could focus on. And the college counseling stuff, I think, has come up, especially in equity discussions. I think
but it's
that
more than just that. It's more than just equity. It's just the whole process itself, like making everybody, like, some kids are really go-getters and some aren't, and some just don't know what to do, and some kids are, have a full schedule. And anyway, I mean, I'm glad I'm not a first-time senior parent at Jones, because I can handle most of it on my own anyway, but I'm just kind of surprised.
Yeah, so I think if we can come up with a short list of possible areas to look at, that could be one of them. We can also look back at the key behaviors, because some of them are a little bit like, I think there's at least 2 that are pretty specific to the college, like college and career readiness area. But if we have sort of a list of possible things at that, in the next like 15 minutes, I think we can assign people to make, just kind of like expand on those. And then we can basically have each set of things to share with Dr. Powers, and see if we have to have another committee meeting before the 12th to have a discussion of it, or whether the discussion can fit into the upcoming LSC meeting. So I think right now, if you have sort of other areas like that, or if you've looked at the culturally responsive teaching and leading standards and something there stands out to you that you want to bring up, that would be helpful. Raquel?
Yeah, I just wanted to speak to, is it Carol? I don't want to mispronounce
My
anyone's
name's
name.
Carol. No, no, my name's Carol. No, there's a typo in there.
Oh, okay.
I just
Well, I'm
noticed
glad I
that
asked.
tonight. No,
Yeah, so I'm sorry to hear that your experience wasn't the same, because I actually felt that my experience when my son graduated was very supportive. There were meetings that the administration had with the parents. The counselors constantly met with the students. I mean, the only thing is, and we can't expect this to happen, is no one sat down next to the students and helped them apply to every school. They helped them create a list and guided them, but you know, at some point, the student and the parents have to be responsible, you know, for these type of things, especially since they are.
I mean, like there was an email that everybody gets a 10-minute meeting or a 20-minute meeting. Okay, you're right, you get a 20-minute meeting. Okay, woohoo, big deal, you know? And then that the students are required to fill out a FAFSA form to graduate.
Yes.
No.
So I'm going to cut this
That's-
discussion off.
Okay.
Yes, the FAFSA thing is actually required by the state, and yeah, it definitely, that is something to, I think, include in this.
But I was just trying to
thing.
find out if there were no meetings with the parents. That's what I was trying to get at.
So for the purpose of this meeting, if people, I'm hoping people can kind of do a quick brainstorm if there's other areas that you want to bring up that might be especially useful for, you know, like a sort of plan-based indicator where it's like, do this step, do that step, do that step, or if there's something that's very measurable, so something like class size or, you know, hiring goals, that kind of thing.
Well, I just would like to know if, I mean, I feel like there could be maybe greater parent involvement in the school, but I don't know if people agree with that, but it seems like there's a lot of people that, you know, they don't participate. But also I'd be curious to know if the school has goals for students to participate in some extracurriculars or clubs or whatever, and how do they feel that we're doing? I would like to know that. Like, are the students really, you know, making the most of the opportunities that the school's offering?
Yeah, that's something that Michelle put in the chat as well. So like student stuff. Yeah, I feel like maybe there's like one behavior that sort of touches on that, but not a ton. Some of the things I was thinking about earlier that were very measurable are things that, and I think that, you know, have been discussed at other LSCs, are things like IEP minutes being met, like if, you know, is something tied to students with disabilities and, you know, services provided for them. Another thing, there are limits on class sizes in the CTU contract. So, you know, basically something related to that, like, you know, how many classes are over and what steps are being taken to try to limit that. So there's definitely been a lot of discussion of like both hiring and retaining teachers of color. And so that is something that I think you could make some measurable goals for, or also sort of like those kind of action step goals that Sarah was talking about. And yeah, so I think those were sort of some of the ones I had thought of before this.
Yeah, I mean, I think something maybe around hiring, because we had talked as an LSC, you know, in LSC meetings about hiring, and was there a process, like a checklist or something to ensure, and there was nothing formalized. And I think like even just putting that in a process, I think there's a lot of parts there already, but just codifying the process, I think that would be, we could talk to PPLC too and see what their feedback was on that.
Yeah, something else to consider is that right now we have standing committees of the LSC, which are equity, budget, and health and safety. So if there are issues that are coming to mind, we're like, you know, this is something the school should be focusing on, or what are we doing about blah, blah, blah. Some of this is stuff that can be brought to committees which then, is a good place to discuss stuff, to bring it to the LSC. And I think something like, the basically college preparation process is something that might be relevant to that. And if there is not a committee that it's super relevant to, then that's something that could be created. So not everything has to be solved as an additional indicator in the principal evaluation process, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't put some energy into looking at it as a school community. And so there's sort of different routes to that. Go ahead, Raquel.
Okay, thank you. I was reading that the PPLC is renewed, re-elected every year at the 5th week of school. So is that happening? And okay, do you know if there's more candidates than the 2 people that are currently on the PPLC?
There's
Or
more
does
than 2 people on the PPLC. There's 2 teachers on the LSC, but the PPLC has
5?
more than 2. They already did their election. I think if you maybe go to our August meeting minutes, or not minutes, but like our public folder, I can look that up. But they announced in one of their reports who was on the PPLC. So let me see if I can find that for you. But on the LSC, there's only 2 teacher reps,
Right.
and they both happen to be on the PPLC.
Okay, thank you. I would appreciate that information.
Okay.
So in the interest of time, if people have any other sort of topic areas, this is your time to bring them up. If you think there's like, areas that in particular that we should be considering. And then of all the different sort of areas that we've talked about, if there's something that you're particularly interested in and would like to help sort of work on a little, half-page to 1-page document about it, this is the time to volunteer to do that. And yes. So anyone have any more sort of topic areas than that we've not heard about? Go ahead, Troy.
Carol, if you are interested in teaming up, I would be happy to help write the college process prep with you as an indicator, if that's something that you'd be interested in doing. And just throwing this out there, I don't know if there's a way that we could have an indicator that kind of encompasses a little bit of like everything that we're talking about. I know there's like the college prep process. I mean, does that tie into, the student stress, or the clubs and activities? So I'll try to also brainstorm a little bit more too, to see if there's anything that I can think of that might tie more of that in together. But I did want to throw that out to Carol if she's interested in helping to write that, and I can co-chair that with you or whatever.
Okay, thank you, Troy.
Thanks, Troy. And so you can have more than one of these. I mean, like I think it's in the resource guide where they're like, attach an extra page if you have more than 2. I don't think that that's super realistic to put together more than 2 sensible things, especially because there are a lot of areas covered in the existing 5 competencies. So we don't want it too redundant. But I think having a couple that we explore is helpful. And it can also guide future things to work on for the LSC, even if it's not, it doesn't become a formal indicator. So it looks like we have Troy and Carol working on the college preparation process. that a good summary of it? Do we have any other interested parties in any of these? I wouldn't mind looking at this like hiring / retention, because I think we have some of that written out, and like, you know, some of that is even written out into the like the equity priorities. So I think that's something that wouldn't be too crazy to work on.
Yeah, let me know if you need help. I mean, I think the hiring piece is interesting to look at. And if you just said that, I'm sorry. I'm looking for my, who got elected to PPLC. Just rope me in wherever you need me.
And I think it's worth looking at these teaching and leading standards to see if any of those stand out, that they could be adapted in a way that makes sense. Especially because, like, you know, someone put a lot of time into thinking of those and creating them and developing them, and they did get a lot of feedback, including from administrators, like Violet said. So it's sort of a good list of, you know, being a culturally responsive leader. So, and I think that sort of sums up what, you know, the role of the principal in the equity process is. So if anyone else, I'll probably,
I'm happy to work with you on that, Cassie.
yeah, and maybe we could at least, I know Violet is very busy, but she could weigh in.
Could I join that conversation as well?
Sure.
Oh, Sarah just sent something and I don't have access to it.
Okay, I'll send it, I'll email it to you.
Okay, thank you. And I have a
Dr.
question.
Plunkett, we'll have minutes from this, so yes, I don't know if they'll be available tomorrow, but soon. And yes, I'll add you to the list of people interested working on the hiring one. Okay. Go ahead, Troy.
So is the plan right now to kind of just like have, we're gonna assumingly be adjourning soon, and then re-meeting next week before the LSC meeting? Is that kind of what you're thinking so far?
Yeah, like, so maybe we could do another hour next Tuesday, where if you've had like agreed to sort of put some detail on one of these things, that you'll have something written up by next Tuesday to discuss. And then we'll have some set of things to share with Dr. Powers, either at that meeting, if he can make that one, or we can, you know, share it with him shortly thereafter, so that it'll be ready for an LSC discussion. Yeah, so, oh man, we'll have to rope someone else into being secretary, that Deborah. Yes, and if you can't make next Tuesday, but you want to work on one of these, that's fine too. I think it will help to have basically 7 days from now, have something written down on each of these topics. Yes. Yes, and if you please send your email address, so that we make sure you get a reminder about the meeting for next week. And send that to me at at my LSC email. And I mean, we'll publicize it the same way we do all these, like the Facebook and the Instagram feed of the of the LSC, and then Troy puts it on the news part of the website. But I think, yeah, let's say next Tuesday again at 6. Let me make sure I can actually do that time. Or a good idea. Yeah, so 6 p.m. October 5th, and have something written up before then if you said you were spearheading that. And yes. Okay, so let's see if we have any last things in the chat here. Yeah, so I think C14 is supposed to be about extracurriculars. And that doesn't mean that we wouldn't want to have a more augmented one. So, you know, like the college process one is sort of covered by, you know, C something, I think, but that could also, if that's sort of a focus, you can make a bigger one out of it. So I don't know if that's something you'd actually want to put any information together on, Michelle, or not? Wait, was it Michelle's suggestion? Yeah, and I think for any of these, like if you look at the key behavior in the list of existing competencies, and you have some additional thoughts about that and what sort of evidence should weigh in on that, that is something that you should, you know, you can bring to an LSC meeting as a public participation, or if it's related to a particular, you know, budget, equity, or health and safety, you can bring it up at a committee meeting, or you can email it to the LSC. So all of those are options as well. If it doesn't seem like something that can be a full-blown additional indicator. Yeah. So I think we have enough sort of little draft topic ideas. And yes, if anyone has questions after this, email me and we'll be able to share the minutes will go in the same folder where we have the agenda, but we can send them out to people as well. Okay. Any last thoughts? If not, let's adjourn. And let's plan to be here again next Tuesday at 6 for anyone who can make that. Thanks, Deborah, for taking notes. And thanks everyone for chatting. And we'll see you next week.
Okay, thank you.